So hello there guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 Podcast. I hope you're doing well. The weather in the UK, often start with the weather, a bit strange why, but you know, that's small talk for you. The weather seems a bit mild at the moment. Certainly complete contrast to what we had a couple of weeks ago when we got a small preview of hell. Quite frankly, from a UK perspective, it wasn't pleasant for some might have enjoyed it. But yeah, hottest day in a long time, 40 degrees, wasn't fun at all. But nonetheless, we're through all of that. It's a little bit milder, everyone can cool down a little bit, and I think it's quite appropriate now as we're heading into the summer break. One more race to go this weekend, the Hungarian Grand Prix. Still plenty of talking points, still plenty of things to go on. The championship, whilst seems to be swinging in Red Bull's direction and Max Verstappen's direction, of course, isn't quite over yet. Let's hope so, at least. But until then, of course, we'll have to wait and see how things transpire this weekend. There's so much to get into now. So join us for an hour of your time and hope you enjoy it. But just as a quick reminder, we are the independent F1 podcast made by the fans and for the fans as we bring you race reviews, previews, and all the latest talking points, news and gossip in the world of Formula One for your listening and viewing pleasure. Of course, so don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Intro aside, yeah, Courtney sort of easing me into that one, if you like, for those of you not watching us on YouTube, you're listening, wondering what the hell is going on. But let's introduce the panel already. We've got Courtney Pine joining us once again. Courtney, how are you doing?
Doing well. You're right. We got through. We actually went through hell and back last week, but we're here. We're all in one piece, and I am very much looking forward to this weekend. I think Hungary's sort of a bit of a silent assassin when it comes to races. It always gives us chaotic races, surprise results, and it's actually a great circuit as well. I think it's one of the most underrated circuits on the calendar, actually. So I'm fully expecting this weekend to deliver.
Absolutely. It's pretty much almost like Monaco, really, in that regards, Hungary. Not one for the overtaking, so certainly will be a challenge for the F1 cars this season, but I'm certainly hoping that we get a race that's at least half as good as what we saw last season. How crazy that was, and given the weather that we've been hearing about, it might be some rain involved again this weekend.
Always so is.
We might get ourselves something pretty special this weekend. But also joining us on the show tonight, we have Lee Wallington, the other DNF1 member. Lee, how are you doing? Good to see you again.
Yeah, I'm doing great, thank you. And I'm just really looking forward to this weekend. I mean, for me, the Hungarian is one of my favourite tracks. I really always enjoy the racing. Even if it's a boring race, I still enjoy it because it's just the way the track flows, just so much more enjoyable to watch than, as you said, Monaco. But the one thing I know is going to be probably an issue this weekend, regardless of the weather, is track limits. Yeah.
Yeah, don't that graphic's going to be an overdrive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly done the rounds in the last few races. I mean, look, I'm fine with track limits. I'm fine with them policing. I know the drivers like to moan about it, but it's one of those things.
I'm happy they're doing it.
Oh, yeah, no, of course. I mean, we get some scenarios where, you know, track limits comes into place, as we saw in Austria. Then we had Mick Schumacher, obviously, in a war of words with the stewards over the lack of consistency in his opinion, although it looked pretty slam dunk to me what was going on there. And I'm sure we're going to get the same thing in Hungary this weekend. Whether or not we get the weather, we'll have to wait and see. But guys, of course, let us know your thoughts for this weekend's race. Let us know your predictions, and send us a bold prediction or two. I often feel that we love to give a bold prediction for this weekend, but I want to hear from you guys, our followers, on what you think could happen this weekend. What sort of bold golden nuggets are out there in your mind that you want to share with us for this weekend? I really would love to see that, and of course we might share some of those on the live review, of course, coming this weekend, 5 p.m. UK time, where we'll be joined by Bryson Sullivan once again. So that certainly will be fun to watch before the summer break. Now, of course, we might as well move to the headline. And a new piece of news that broke quite recently at the point of recording this, Red Bull confirming that Porsche have bought a 50% stake into the team, which is something that we were expecting at some point. Porsche, Red Bull news, and in particular news with the Volkswagen Group was doing the round with Red Bull. And as I said, we expected this news to happen for some time. Of course, this has huge bearing on the 2026 regulations, where we expect Porsche to take much more of an invested interest. As I understand, it's a 10-year partnership at this point. So what are our thoughts on this one, guys? Do we expect this partnership to have any impact on what's going on at Red Bull right now? Or is this purely something that is just a formality and will take shape in the next few years as we approach the 2026 engine regulations?
Oh, a couple of things spring to mind. I mean, whatever they've been doing at Red Bull with the powertrain research has certainly been working, because they arguably have the best engine at the moment, and certainly the best combination of reliability in relation to pure pace. They've probably got the best package overall. So, in one sense, things are going well, but it seems to be like an identity crisis around the Red Bull powertrain. What is it? Is it a Honda powertrain? Is it a Milton Keynes powertrain? Is it Mercedes powertrain in brackets, because they pretty much stole all of the engine team from Mercedes? So maybe they do need, like before it was Red Bull Renault. Maybe they do need like that Red Bull Porsche sort of identity, so then they know exactly where they're going. They can carpet. I'm not going to try to say the word. Put the team into compartments, let it run more smoothly. But then, even with like, elements of the research, like intellectual property, almost like we discussed it before we come on there, like what belongs to who. So there's going to be like a lot of like divorce claims almost that are going to have to be sorted out before this deal comes into fruition.
Yeah, I almost feel like we're going to have to wait and see what comes out from the Red Bull perspective before we sort of make any sort of judgments on how this is going to unfold. I mean, Lee, obviously, before we went on air, we were talking a bit about this, and obviously Honda might be concerned, because Honda, even though they did sort of break away from Red Bull because they wanted to pursue other projects after the success story of last season, which resulted in Max Verstappen winning the engine the engine supplier's first world championship in, we're talking, 30 years or something like that?
Yeah.
If memory serves me right. So it's one of those really where Honda never really went away. Of course they did, but they still maintained the power units at Red Bull. They still put stuff together. They probably still provide some element of research and development on them. I know Red Bull powertrains have kind of taken the lion's share of that over, although the understanding is that's with a view to what's happening in 2026 more than actually looking after what's happening in 2022. So what are your thoughts on this? Where do Honda fit into all of this?
Right. Really Honda is how much of the intellectual property Red Bull powertrains bought from Honda. Is it more that they pay Honda for the engine manufacturing and supplying of the engines, but they don't, obviously Honda don't supply the branding, so it's a Red Bull powertrain and they just stick a Red Bull powertrain on? Or is it they've bought all the intellectual property and all the research and development that applies to that? Obviously, that's probably details that we don't know. That's probably going to be all like legal matters in the Article 5, 6, 7, 8, 23, 100 of the actual contract that Red Bull and Honda signed from the use of their engines. But there is probably, I doubt that Red Bull bought the full intellectual property of the Honda engine. I think that's probably, they would have considered an unnecessary cost for the engine. Maintaining it is one thing, but the engine supplier puts so much money into it that Red Bull, why would they pay millions, if not more, for the intellectual property rights? So I doubt that. That'd be an issue. So as Courtney says, the divorce bill and how much Honda wants to potentially keep the Porsche engineers away, although the engine regs will be changing. They're still competitors in the car market. They don't want to have another manufacturer having access to their intellectual property that may not be road relevant, but that's not the point. So there's still a lot to come on to see about how Honda reacts to that. But also another question is, what about AlphaTauri? Obviously, it's still Red Bull owned. They're not going to be part of the buyout because it's obviously the Red Bull team, but they use the Porsche engines. Does that mean AlphaTauri now becomes the de facto Red Bull team because it's now Red Bull owned and not 50% Porsche owned? And so there's still a fallout for the other team, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of time for this to sort itself out. But obviously, the early foundations are there. We expected this to be announced, I think, what was it, the first week of August? I think they said the 4th of August. Not quite sure why that date has any significance. Let me know in the chat, of course, or in the comments below, if you like, if you know why August the 4th is a significant date. I know that some companies, when these sort of deals go through, they always love picking a specific date for a certain reason. So I don't know we'll have to wait and see what happens. It might just be, just to get the F1 out of the way, and we'll worry about that in the summer.
Push for you.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Something like that. But on the track, Red Bull, of course, they're going into this race now almost at the we're past the halfway stage of the season technically. Max Verstappen has a 63-point gap to Charles Leclerc. Red Bull have an 84-point gap to Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. And so far, Red Bull, they've probably, been looking at certain races this season that they probably felt that they shouldn't have won, and yet they have done. And they've just been going along like a well-oiled machine at the moment. People saying, Max Verstappen, has he calmed himself down in how he conducts himself when he's racing against his championship rival compared to where he was last season? Perhaps. But at the same time, it's not exactly like Leclerc and Ferrari combined until after Australia, with the exception perhaps of one or two races this season. They've really given them too much to worry about. So with all that in mind, guys, what are we expecting for Red Bull this weekend? And so far, how would you judge them so far this season?
Well, Red Bull can sort of, mind the pun, they can take their foot off the pedal a bit, in all honesty. Like there might be scenarios throughout the rest of the season where they might even turn the engine mode down on the engine just to literally get the thing over the line. And they'll be able to do that now because they have such an advantage over Ferrari, particularly in the Drivers' Championship. Max Verstappen won't have to do anything too bold. He can finish the majority of the races second behind Charles Leclerc and still win the championship. That's the reality of the situation. So I imagine in the second half of the season, Red Bull and Max will be focusing more on reliability than actually trying to get the maximum results. Because it's great for Red Bull at the moment. Fantastic for them.
Yeah, I think I remember reading somewhere. I can't remember what the source is. So if someone does know, please do let me know. In the championship right now between Max and Leclerc, the gap is so big in Max's favour that he could afford, in theory, to come second in every race that's left this season and still win the World Championship, assuming Leclerc wins all the other races, as long as he gets a few fastest laps. So it's very much in his control right now. And Max, whether you love him or hate him, he's driving to a level right now where I don't really feel like he's being pushed to the absolute limit. I think he's certainly being pushed at times, but we saw in France for the period when he was racing Leclerc that, he was doing a good job behind him, managing the stint well. Red Bull and Ferrari, depending on who you are, seem quite confident that if Leclerc hadn't crashed out, either one of them would have won that race. They seem quite confident in that. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. But overall, I can't really look at this weekend and think what are Red Bull going to do that's differently. I think they're just going to run their race, do the best job they can, and there's a very good chance that they'll get the victory this weekend. Lee, what are your thoughts for Red Bull this weekend, and in particular for Max Verstappen?
Well, I mean, they probably have a very good chance to fight for the victory. Obviously, the thing to think about is, apart from ignoring the Ferrari liability or the Ferrari team errors or driver errors, presume that they all go well, which I know is saying something for Ferrari at the moment. But the speed that Ferrari has in the slow speed corners, that's the real question of, can Red Bull match that? Because for me, I think this looks like a track that's going to suit Ferrari more than Red Bull just because of the speed that Ferrari has in those slow speed corners. So that's going to be Red Bull's big focus, is the slow speed corners. There's no big sweep, or there's not really any big sweeping corners in Hungarian rinks, all slow speed for the most part. So that's going to be their sole focus for this weekend, of trying to potentially close that gap, which there probably will be in P1 between the Ferrari and the Red Bull.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the biggest concern that Red Bull have going into this weekend, an area that they might need to be concerned about, is Sergio Perez. Because, last time out in France, he was not really on it at all. If he was having trouble with the upgrades, and if the upgrades have taken this car more out of his hands and more into Verstappen's hand, which is certainly plausible, that might be an area of concern for them. In Austria, of course, he had that issue in qualifying where, he shouldn't have got to Q3 because he breached track limits, and of course he had to recover that. And this was on a sprint weekend as well, so he had more opportunities, and his involvement at the front was quite limited there as well. So is that an area that he needs to address before going into the summer break, or do you feel right now that Red Bull won't be too concerned about that?
Well, Red Bull should keep an eye on that because look, we saw in France that if Sergio Perez isn't on it and Mercedes have a better weekend, then they could be in a position where they could be dropping more points. Say there's a minor miracle when Ferrari somehow sort out their issues and they start getting regular wins and 1-2s or double podiums, and instead of being up there in the battle, Sergio Perez finds himself scrapping against Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Ferrari could eat away at that points total. I think it's easy to dismiss points gaps in the constructors battle because you got, oh, that's a big gap. But actually, it's not because there are so many more points at stake. You've got obviously 2 drivers worth of points. So even though it looks fairly large, Ferrari could much more easily eat into that gap rather than Charles Leclerc can into Max Verstappen. So they won't be majorly concerned right now, but they definitely have to keep an eye on Sergio Perez's form because we're seeing if he's not on his best form, Mercedes have a decent car. They've got 2 world-class drivers in Lewis Hamilton and George Russell that will give him grief.
Yeah, I think it was something that would have concerned Red Bull, the fact that not only one, but both Mercedes cars did beat him outright in France. I mean, it certainly was a race weekend where Perez wasn't really on it compared to the others, but at the very least, he should be beating them. He shouldn't really be losing outright to them, so it was a bit of a concern for them. I'm sure, hopefully for their sake, that they'll get it right, but Perez, yeah, his form it's not been as strong as it has been early in the season, and there's something that they're going to have to find out with, if it's because of this car being developed and it's playing more into Max's hands. We'll have to wait and see, but I digress on that one. Should we talk about Ferrari for a little bit?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yes, the old bombshell with Ferrari at the moment. I mean, this is a tough one because we all agree since the start of the season, Ferrari have produced one hell of a car. It's a car that should be winning this world championship in theory, and there's been a lot of races this season where we can cite reliability problems, strategy mistakes from the drivers. No one's certainly exempt from that. It's a team right now that we all know, and we got a huge reminder of it at the start of the season, that they can still produce a car capable of winning races and winning world championships. For the life of me, guys, and I want to cite something that, Maurizio Arriva-Bene said back in 2018 in Abu Dhabi when he was reflecting on the season when the championship, should have been won by Vettel and it completely capitulated in a similar fashion to what we're seeing right now, perhaps a bit more extreme, but, nonetheless, we're still seeing it. And he basically said this team needs to learn how to win a world championship or learn to get that winning culture back. And back then, I remember hearing that and I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, but how? You need to elaborate on that. It's a bit vague. I'm starting to understand the nuances of what he was saying in that through watching what we're seeing this season. Because it's a team right now, yes, perhaps it hasn't got that winning culture installed in it in the way that previous generations of Ferrari personnel have. I mean, Matteo Binotto was a part of that. For many, many years during the Michael Schumacher era, he's seen success and failure in equal measure at Ferrari as much as anybody. But the hard part seems to be trying to install that into the team that they have. And I'm not trying to cite anyone out here. I'm literally generalizing everyone at Ferrari here as a collective. The winning culture is not there anymore. They're trying to get it back. And this is something ultimately, in my opinion, that is lacking compared to the likes of what we're seeing at Mercedes and Red Bull at the moment, and why those two teams have proven to have been so successful over the last decade and a half, and Ferrari have come up short. So it's a real problem right now that I do not really know how they're going to sort this out. But this is something ultimately they have to figure out if they're going to win world championships again. Lee, what are your thoughts on Ferrari in general going into this race? As I said already, and sort of went on a bit of a monologue/rant at the moment.
Well, I think you got it in a nutshell. Is the Ferrari operations, and something that we've moaned about all year and last year is about the Ferrari operations, and it's, as you said, it's the winning mentality. Is like if you looked at the Matthias checklist of things to improve in the team, win championship. It's like, what's the sub details to that tick box? It's all right. It's a bit of a joke there, but they really need to. It's more just the refinement, the act, the small little details. Ferrari operate better than any midfield team, but their competition isn't a midfield team. it's fine. It's getting that next step up. And I mean, you look at Mercedes and Red Bull; they hire off of each other. And Red Bull won 2010 to 2014, and then Mercedes won. And Mercedes hired off of Red Bull. Red Bull now hired from Mercedes. Ferrari in Italy, like, well, I don't want to go to Italy from the UK because most of the teams are in the UK. So it's a small little pocket that they don't really hire from the other teams, especially winning teams. So they lose out that. Oh, this is how we did it in Mercedes. This is how we did in Red Bull. Okay, there'll be some, but not on the scale that Mercedes and Red Bull hire from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the Ferrari need to go away and think about, should we look at poaching staff members from Mercedes and Red Bull to bring that information and knowledge that we're currently lacking, is the winning mentality, the process and the improvement of. And I know from a personal experience, you go into a new job, why do you do something like that? That's really silly. That's really backwards. And that's what Ferrari needs. They need that internal suggestions.
Yeah, I'll just follow on. I'll give you a prime example of that, Lee, to back up your point. James Allison. I remember when James Allison was getting involved in the Ferrari design in 2015, and they actually had quite a good start to the season. I remember when they actually beat the Mercedes outright in Malaysia, and I think it was the first time Mercedes were beaten on outright pace since the change of regulations. And for the first time, I thought, okay, with James Allison there, could they continue to develop a car that could challenge Mercedes? Now, unfortunately, there were circumstances in James Allison's life which meant he wanted it back in the UK. And then, ironically, he ended up going to Mercedes. And we've seen he's designed some fantastic cars that have dominated championships since. So that's absolutely an example where you're right. They need to be looking at some of the better talent outside of Italy. I'm not saying that every single member of that team is Italian. They do bring people in from around the world. But right, I think they need to do that a lot more. They have to sort of Red Bull and Mercedes are the blueprint of how to win championships. I'm not saying I have to copy it, because you do have to do your own thing to be special at times, but they do need to look at how Mercedes and Red Bull operate, because it shows that it works.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I totally understand that. I mean, I don't want to try and, tell Ferrari. I mean, they wouldn't be listening to us on this podcast, and if they were taking our opinion seriously, then obviously there's a big no-no. But
speak for yourself.
No. I mean, in general. I mean, why would? Yeah. Can you imagine Matty Binotto just?
Adam, you're hired. You know you're.
One can dream, but no, I doubt Matty Binotto or anyone with any credibility at Ferrari, whether it Laura Meeks or Jacques Clear or anyone, sort of listening in and thinking, do you know what? He's got a point. We've got to do this. No, I don't think we've made any relevant points really. What I was trying to say is I don't want Ferrari to fall back into the blame culture. Vibe, which I feel like that's what we're trying to tell them here. They need to find better people. The people they have are crap. No, that's not what we're suggesting. No. But ultimately, there's something there that they've just got to figure out, if it's being more assertive or being more, showing more conviction in their decision making. Because look, we saw this in France with Sainz, and we've seen this a few times this season. We've seen this with Ferrari for such a long time now, that they're just so indecisive and almost afraid to make the bold decision. I mean, if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. But they're too busy playing with the calculators or trying to run the numbers when all the action's happening on the circuit, and they're not reacting to it. If anything, they're trying to sit on things, almost as if like, no, we're coming up with a sensible solution that's going to work. You guys just don't know it yet.
Passive.
And then it just, and then it just doesn't happen. I mean, Austria was an example of when Ferrari know what they're doing and stick to it, it works a treat. And they should have got a 1-2 that weekend. It was just reliability that prevented that. But those weekends are so few and far between that when they do happen, you almost don't trust Ferrari to execute the optimum strategy when it's right there for them. So for me, it's something that they kind of have to address. I don't want to get into, I don't want to sort of, not advise, but I don't want to sort of suggest that what Ferrari need to do is rip up the rule book and start again. I mean, they did that a few years ago and it's brought them this far, but to make that final step forward, it's something that they're going to have to figure out. I don't know what that is. If I did, I'd be working for them and telling them what to do, if they'd be silly enough to hire me to do it. But, that's neither here nor there. Looking at the drivers now, because I think that's something that is controllable at this point, and specifically on Charles Leclerc this weekend. And this is a weekend where I think Ferrari, despite everything that's been going on, can look at this circuit, look at the characteristics of their cars, say, yes, this is a weekend where we should win, and perhaps win well. It suits the characteristics of their car. It suits the characteristics of their drivers. I think this is going to be a good weekend for Ferrari, assuming that there are no issues or mistakes or anything like that. And again, that's a big if, given what we've seen this season. But with Charles Leclerc right now, this is a guy that has shown immense talent, especially this season. And he drives very aggressively, very attack-minded, someone that loves an oversteery car, but is prone to an error or two. And often ones that can affect him from a mental perspective and can also derail his form one way or another. And we've seen that a few times this season when he's really, really pushed. We saw it in Imola. We saw it in France. Right, it hasn't happened as often as it normally does. But these are the things that he has to eradicate from his driving if he is going to win a world championship. And he said it himself. He said if he keeps making these mistakes, he doesn't deserve to be a world champion. And you look at what Ferrari have right now, you look at what Leclerc is doing right now, and you look back to what Max Verstappen has done, what Sir Lewis Hamilton has done. These guys do not make those mistakes, at least not anymore. And that's why they go on to achieve so much. So, guys, what do we think Charles Leclerc needs to do? Is it just a mental block that he needs to address, or is it just a case where he needs to iron out those final few rough edges from his overall driving of craft in order to become a world champion?
I know we've been doing a lot of Ferrari bashing, but I think the solution is simple. Look, Charles Leclerc has the pace. I think he needs to trust the car and the team more, which is easier said than done, given everything that's happened. You've got to remember, these guys are driving these absolute beasts. I think sometimes we take it for granted how much ability it takes to, run the cars to the optimum. So if he's got the slightest niggle that there could be something wrong with the car, or something's about to go wrong with the car, that is going to at some point affect his driving. And it's still not 100%. We still don't know 100% if the incident that you had in France was somehow related to a slight reliability gremlin. We're still not entirely sure. Or maybe he was paranoid that something was going wrong, took his eye off the ball a little bit, and that's why he went off.
I don't believe that it was, because I know the way it fed into the broadcast kind of made people feel that there was something wrong. And I think Nico Rosberg kind of not played to that, because he's a very smart man, and what he doesn't know about Formula One isn't worth knowing. But what he said at the time seemed like, seems such a strange thing to do. Like, he's not pushing, he's on. I mean, he kind of was pushing, because they're on in laps. Those laps probably wasn't in lap. We don't know if he was pitting that lap. He might have done, he might not have done. Either way, Ferrari were going to be undercut by Red Bull, and would have ended up in a scenario, in my opinion, where I think both of them would have gone to the end. But if Leclerc was going to win that race, he was going to have to pass Max Verstappen. People say, what would have happened? Sometimes we don't entertain that idea, but that's my opinion. I think he would have definitely had to have passed Max. But going back to the throttle issue, I'll be honest with you, mate, I do not think that this was an issue. I just think there was a time that it came out in the broadcast, and it was more to do with the fact of why perhaps he couldn't reverse out or find that gear that allowed him to sort of come back on the track and try and limit the damage and maybe secure a top 5 or top 6 finish or whatever you want. But no, I think, and this is something that I think if it was this issue, Ferrari would have owned it. They wouldn't have just hid it under. I know we're talking about Ferrari here, who like to keep certain things under wraps, but Leclerc was quite adamant that it was his fault. The data seemed to suggest, and it was, I did look this up, and it was a little bit of rudimental data that I was looking, but I can't really see any evidence that the car messed up. I think this was more on Leclerc just pushing a little bit too much, went a little bit wide on the white line, on the dirty side, on the line that I think Anthony Davidson ran through this as well, that caused the error. So, as I said, it's one of those things that Leclerc has to look back on, and he is taking it rather hard, and I completely understand why, because he expects so much of himself, but this is something that he really needs to find a way to eradicate from his skill set, refine that out, if he wants to become a world champion, because he's an incredibly talented driver. And I hate the idea that some people compare him to Gilles Villeneuve, purely and simply because it implies that he's incredibly fast, but don't back him to win over a season, because he'll be brilliant for a few races, and then obviously mistakes will come far too often because of the way that you drive. You have to find a way to sort of find that balance, if you like, to sort of make that work. So, this weekend's a great opportunity to sort of come back from that. Lee, what do you think Charles Leclerc needs to do? Courtney was talking about earlier, before I went on another bit of a rant, about Leclerc having to trust the team a bit more, trust the car a little bit more. What are your thoughts for him this weekend?
I do think part of it is maybe he's a bit too much in his head, and he's already knows he's behind Max, and he knows he needs to win, or he knows he needs to score so points. He knows he needs to be on pole. He needs to be ahead of Max, and it's not so much pressure, but you could say it's probably pressure. It's starting to build on him internally that he knows he needs to be ahead of Max to get back in, and he's not overdriving, because I don't like that term, but he's overdriving, and it's putting himself in this precarious situation. And that's just my thoughts on it. Obviously, I don't know what's going on inside his head. And I think probably part of it is the trust in the car, that the car is going to last. Is that both drivers have concerns about the car, and the slightest thing slightly off, and it's, oh no, it's something's happening. You look at this, and where you hear Lewis reports it, and it's like, okay, we'll look into it. Lewis comes back, bam, that's not to worry, it's all good. But they're both drivers are rightly so worried about if they'll make it into the race because of how this season's gone. So that probably plays a part in Charles's mind and his thoughts. But at the same time, you could argue that he trusts the team slightly too much, because he doesn't question the team. He's like, yeah, the team does it, it's all good. Where Carlos, he's always like, why are you doing that? Let's say, no, we should do this, which is a bit like how Sebastian was when his better days at Ferrari, was like, we should be doing this, It's which is where, like, Damon Hill recently said that he believes Carlos Sainz is the team leader in Ferrari, not Charles Leclerc, because Charles doesn't think on his feet. So maybe it's another part that Charles needs to do, is think on his feet more, and not just obey the team to think that they always know best.
Maybe it's a
Can I follow on?
thing, yeah.
Can I follow on? Sorry.
Go for it.
Lee. Sorry. Do you reckon, I might be going off on a slight tangent here, but could the fact that he came through the Ferrari driver academy, he's sort of been involved from a young age, that maybe he feels that, like, he'd be like disobeying his teachers or stepping out of line, because you got to remember, like, he would have worked for a lot of these people since he was a kid, and maybe sometimes he feels like it's not his place to talk about certain things, whereas Carlos Sainz has only just come back into the team, so the dynamic could well be an issue there.
Well, the dynamic's certainly been tested and strained. I mean, Silverstone was a prime example of that, and we saw in Monaco as well that. I don't know. I'm kind of the opinion where I feel like Leclerc should assert himself a little bit more in these sorts of decisions, in the same way that Sainz does. But as I said, it just kind of all fits in together. I mean, I could ask the question right now, has the final nail already been put in the coffin for Charles Leclerc's championship hopes of 2022, in the same way that Sebastian Vettel's was in 2018 after Hockenheim?
True. I agree.
I mean, that's a genuine question,
exactly, yeah. That's exactly how it's turned out, and I think it's only halfway through the season, but Ferrari needs to go back to the drawing board, not only in terms of the way the car goes and the running over the weekend, but also the dynamic between the drivers. They need to fine tune all these things, because the potential's there. There's just a lot of fine tuning that needs to happen to that team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's completely over yet. I think it's still a bit too early for that, despite the fact that I said it was over in Australia, because what do I know? But I can't help but feel that the way that this season is unravelling for Leclerc and Ferrari in particular, that the images we saw in France amongst Monaco and Spain and, Baku as well, let's not forget, amongst other things, those are the images, those are the shots that we're going to remember. Those are going to be the transitions that we see, or the highlights throughout the season, where it all just went horribly wrong for Ferrari after such an encouraging start. So for whatever reason, if they can get the win this weekend, fantastic, and they can take that and go into the summer break, try and see if they can figure out how to sort this out and go on an incredible run to try and make a go of this towards the end of the season. Because at this point, this is the only option for them. It's literally just, it's win or bust at this point for Ferrari, and they've only got themselves to blame. Let's move on to Carlos Sainz, because I'm quite intrigued by this dynamic with Carlos Sainz, because Lee already cited on this earlier, a bit of a team leader dynamic at Ferrari, and despite the rough edges and the issues that he had at the start of the season, he started to come alive a lot more recently. And I feel like this is because he understands the car so much better. I know this is something that you could argue that the car was specifically designed and made to suit Charles' style more than Carlos Sainz, but over time he's come to grips with it. He's learned the car better. He's put in a real graft to get on top of things. And whilst he's still not on that ultimate pace of Leclerc, by evidence of what we saw in Q2 in France last weekend, which was an incredible lap, only Leclerc's pole lap was better than it, it just shows that Carlos Sainz is right there now on pace. His race pace was very good as well. And if it wasn't for Leclerc's crash compromising his strategy, he could have easily been on the podium last weekend. So what are we thinking about Carlos Sainz, guys? Are you encouraged by what we're seeing from him at the moment, and you think he can carry that on for the rest of the season? And what do you think he can do this weekend?
I think the fact that he's got his first race win under his belt, we discussed this throughout the season. Once Carlos Sainz gets that first race win, he'll settle in to the team and, sort of build his own history as part of Ferrari's history, because going to a team like Ferrari and not be a race winner like that is a burden to carry. Ferrari are famed for bringing in drivers that are capable of winning races and world championships. So that was a pressure that would have been on Carlos Sainz's shoulders. I know he deep down knows he has the ability, but to actually say, look, I'm a race winner, that's a big thing. So now he's done that, he should be able to kick on. And I do feel that Ferrari should use the second half of this season to prepare another assault for 2023, because I know you guys think that the championship's still open. For me, I think it's obviously it'd be very negative of them just to give up. But I do feel that they should be focusing the second half of the season on fine-tuning all these kind of things that went wrong in 2022. Go again for 2023. And I think Carlos Sainz will be in a better position to back the team, or if not, challenge Charles more on a regular basis.
Lee, what would you put down to Sainz's form of late? Are you feeling confident now that he's finally on top of this car and can now push on?
Yeah, I'm confident that he's on top of the car. At the moment, the team dynamic between Carlos and Charles remind me a bit of Lewis and Nico. That Charles has the raw pace like Lewis, but Carlos has the tenacity and the technical knowledge of like Nico had. That going back a few years, that Nico wouldn't be as fast as Lewis at the box, but he can fine-tune copy data, fine-tune setup, and then Nico be there on it or just a bit faster than Lewis. So I think that with Carlos, he's got on top of the car, he's more comfortable. He fine-tunes. He doesn't have that raw talent of Charles, but he's there or thereabouts now. And now he's got there, and as Courtney said, he's got his race win. I think he's no longer in his head. He can do it. And he's got enough self-belief that he's probably be more closer to Charles throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a really good point. But let us know your thoughts, guys. Obviously, this is a big talking point on Ferrari, of course, and a lot of emphasis on them this year. And I think on this channel, we focus quite a lot on them, understandably. So we are intrigued to know what you think. So let us know in the comments if, of course, you're watching us on YouTube. And, of course, if you're not watching us on YouTube and you're listening to us on your favourite podcasting platform, you can contact us on our socials. Let us know on our Twitter or Instagram, or even tune into the YouTube video and put your comments in as well. We'd certainly appreciate your feedback and your thoughts on everything right now. Let's move on to Mercedes. Now, there's a lot of reason to be buoyant right now in the Mercedes camp, and it's not often that you would think, reviewing this turbo hybrid era, that Mercedes would be delighted with a double podium, assuming that neither of them were going to win the race. As we are, once again, Mercedes getting podium after podium after podium after podium, picking up the big points, only 44 points behind Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship, and they are getting on top of this new car. However, I don't want to be that guy, the unpopular guy, but I just feel right now that if I were a Mercedes, I think we need to kind of calm ourselves down a little bit. And the reason for that is nothing to do with the fact that George Russell and Sir Lewis Hamilton are not doing a fantastic job, because they are. They are doing a fantastic job of what they're doing. George's consistency has been incredible. Sir Lewis has really found his mojo again. I mean, I don't think there was a point where Sir Lewis was not driving well. He wasn't really getting the rub of the green. He was doing a lot of experimental work. He still kind of is. I mean, we saw in France this weekend that he was trying literally every rear wing concept that Mercedes had. But I do feel that they probably expected the upgrades that they had scheduled for Silverstone and France alike to bring them further closer to Red Bull and Ferrari. And despite the result, I feel that there's not an asterisk, but some caveats at play here where there were certain factors that went Mercedes' way. You know, the timing of the safety car completely obliterated the strategy woes or any opportunity that Red Bull might have had to get Perez ahead of either Mercedes in this case. The fact that Perez was certainly off his game, what was happening with both Ferraris, of course, we have to factor that in. Max Verstappen obviously had a very easy job to manage the race after that, so I don't think he was pushing anywhere near as much as he could have done. So at the moment, Mercedes are certainly a bit closer, but I feel like they probably hoped, or maybe kidded themselves into thinking they were actually closer than they actually are. So at this point in time, I think they're doing a great job, but I still think there's still quite a way to go before we can start talking about a genuine three-way fight where any one of those 6 cars could win right now. I feel like they're in there or thereabouts, but they're not quite there to sort of influence the result. They're just there to pick up the pieces at the moment and do the best job they can, which, to their credit, they are doing a phenomenal job. Guys, I know you are both on the other side of this argument where you feel Mercedes are actually quite close, and it's only a matter of time at this point, but what are your thoughts on them going into this weekend, and how would you assess their sort of recovery, if you like, so far?
I think the biggest question mark surrounding Mercedes season is how is this new technical directive that's going to come in after summer break going to affect the pecking order? Look, there's a lot of talk, particularly online, that the technical directive could well hamper Ferrari and Red Bull and will give Mercedes an opportunity to get onto a level footing. We're not going to know the answer to this until Spa, at least. I think that the thing for me, looking at Mercedes, is that if they get within a couple attempts of Ferrari in particular, because they're so well run, because both of their drivers are so on point, they'll just be able to pick up the results in comparison to Ferrari, despite having a slight pace deficit. So I don't expect Mercedes to be, being the all-conquering team that they used to be. But I do feel in the second half of the season that they are going to be upsetting a Red Bull, or at least one Red Bull or Ferrari, the way that we saw them do to Sergio Perez in France.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, a lot's been said of this technical directive, mostly by people that actually don't understand how this is going to affect the pecking order, or actually what certain nuances are actually existing on these flexi floors between some teams compared to others, including ourselves. At the moment, it's all conjecture and speculation.
Exactly.
I think there's a desire, almost kidding ourselves into thinking that this is going to be a game changer. I think the 2023 rule changes that the FIA are trying to push are the real game changer that could help Mercedes more than others. And now that's not me saying that Mercedes are trying to influence this to their advantage. I mean, there's a big argument right now with 6 of the teams. No secret for guessing which 6 of them are. Basically anyone that doesn't have a Mercedes power unit in them, although I think Williams actually might be one exception, so I must add that in. That aren't fans of what the FIA are trying to do in terms of this issue with porpoising. I'm still convinced that this is more a case down to performance, and they don't want 2 teams running away with it, and it taking several years for one team to catch them and everyone else to not have a chance until 2026, which is obviously not what they want. So we can discuss that another time. But with this technical directive, as I said, a lot's been said on it. I'm not convinced that this will change things in terms of the overall pecking order. It has the potential to maybe take a 10th here or there, but I'm no expert on this, and I've not heard from anyone that actually has any actual knowledge of this and knows what they're talking about, suggesting for a second that this is going to suddenly put Mercedes right to the front of the field, or at the very least on par with Red Bull and Ferrari right now. So we'll have to wait and see. It could have an effect, may not. Maybe Red Bull and Ferrari have solutions already in place that they're going to implement in the summer break. We'll have to wait and see. But Lee, I want to get your thoughts on, the sort of the points that Courtney and I were just making on Mercedes right now. How would you assess things for them right now? Do you feel that they are very much maximising their opportunities? And where do you feel they currently stand? Do you think they'll be satisfied with the progress that they made, or do you feel that perhaps they were hoping to be a bit closer at this point?
Well, firstly, I'll start with, I think they're definitely maximising the opportunities that come their way. Obviously, they've had some bad luck, but every team has a bit of bad luck. I'm not just saying bad luck about designing the car. I just mean about safety cars, bits and things, not the car design. But I do think they're slightly disappointed that they're not as close as they thought they may be with the Silverstone and the French Grand Prix upgrades. But I also think they'll be pleased at how much progress they've made since the start of the season. So they can't obviously win everything in what they want. They're closing a gap and they're doing it. They're doing it slowly but steadily. They're chipping away. With the technical directive, I agree that I don't think Mercedes will all of a sudden be the fastest car. Obviously, I don't know the actual technical output or what's actually going to happen. With, as Courtney said, we'll find out in Spa. But I think it will maybe make Mercedes slightly closer, even if it's just by a thousandth or something. It will close the gap slightly. But what I do see for the rest of the season is I do still think Mercedes will win a race this season. With Mercedes already now in the territory that they're an annoyance to Ferrari and Red Bull strategically. Beginning of the season, Mercedes weren't an issue for the Red Bull and Ferrari strategists. You had Mercedes for the most part, they're in a no man's land. They didn't bother Ferrari, Red Bull, they didn't bother midfield. They just were there. But now they're close enough that a Red Bull leading Ferrari or a leading Red Bull could pit and they'll be behind Mercedes. And that's your race win gone. So that's the problem that Ferrari and Red Bull now face themselves. And that's where potential safety cars or red flag situation, Mercedes could grab it. Actually, they go, I've won a race because they've pitted. I've got track position. We have a 1-2, for example. 1 lap left. Oh, there you go. I've got a race win. It's very opportunistic, but Mercedes will go for opportunistic win if it comes their way. So that's why they may not get on pure pace, but I still believe that they'll get a race win just because they're close enough to be an annoyance to the top two. But on to this weekend, Mercedes, the Hungarian doesn't have a lot of long straights, so there's less opportunity for the draggy Mercedes to get swamped on the straights. But obviously, the question of how they are on the slow speed, that their cars changed a lot since Monaco, so we can't say how they would be on that. Where we know Ferrari's strengths is slow speed. So Mercedes could do surprisingly well if they have changed since Monaco, as I said. But at the very least, there's less straights for them to be overtaken on.
Yeah, I'm kind of expecting Mercedes to be looking over their shoulder a little bit more this weekend than perhaps looking at Red Bull and Ferrari. But we'll see. Hungary's one of those circuits where we could see a surprise or two. I mean, last year, Bottas decided to T-bone half the field. And we got a great race out of it, So, and it's going to be wet again. So you never know. Maybe Valtteri's feeling generous in his Alfa Romeo, and he just, we didn't see much of Valtteri in France. Maybe he'll make up for that and wait and see. Not implying that he would deliberately do that, but it could happen to anybody, especially with these new cars as well. Could happen to anybody. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. But what have you made in recent weeks of this sort of change in demeanour of Sir Lewis Hamilton? And I ask this respectfully because I look, nobody wants to be in a situation where you feel like you're going nowhere, the car's not improving, things are difficult, and you're fighting more at the back and trying to recover, especially in qualifying a few times this season, than where he has been right now, where he's been on the podium the last 4 races. You could argue, other than Verstappen, he's been the most consistent driver going, or perhaps best driver in, value for money, if you like, or machine, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know, I just feel like he's a lot more positive about things. I mean, Lewis's feedback and Lewis's work behind the scenes, I often feel has been underrated throughout his time at Mercedes. People have often categorised him as a guy that will go out, do his shows, do his diversity work, and, do his other projects, if you like, and then come back at the weekend and wipe the floor with the competition on race day. That was something that people often said that he did, and sometimes people attacked him for without understanding what was actually going on. But I do often felt that his work was underrated and what he actually put in. You look at him now, and you see and you're hearing some of the things that he's saying, how positive he's been talking about things, how he's enjoying this new challenge. If anything, he's enjoying it more now than he was when he was winning world championships on a yearly basis. So for me, I often feel that I have to sort of look at what's going on right now and take it for what it's worth. I mean, what are your thoughts on this one, guys, on this with Sir Lewis Hamilton? Is this a noticeable change that's sort of equaling better fortunes, the better rub of the green that he's had recently compared to George Russell, where it was the other way round earlier in the season? And by contrast, he's putting together better performances in George. He's establishing a little bit of dominance in the team now, I feel. What are your thoughts on this right now?
I think if you have a look at Lewis's career, and particularly in recent years, he's always preferred to be the hunter rather than the hunted. And some of Lewis's best drives in his career have come from when he's had to take big engine penalties, or he's had the incident at the start of the race, and he worked his way through the field. That's where you've seen some of the most vintage drives from Lewis Hamilton. So I think he's definitely relishing a new challenge. And I think the engineering, it's really good that you mentioned that, the engineering side of things. He's pretty much achieved everything that he needs to achieve in terms of raw pace. He's done that. He's got the championships. But now he's looking at the engineering side. And I think this come from his 2016 defeat to Nico Rosberg. You both mentioned, well, Lee in particular highlighted how Nico Rosberg always focused on, the engineering side of things and able to maximize the performance of the car to challenge Lewis. And it was those kind of performances from Nico Rosberg that got him over the line in 2016. And I think Lewis learned from that. And the defeat to Nico Rosberg in 2016 actually made Lewis an even better all-round driver, which we didn't think was possible at the time. We thought, look, Lewis is unbeatable. He had an off-season in 2016, and that defeat actually made him a better driver. And I think maybe he's looking at that defeat in 2016, and it's the first season, really, even last season, he was in the hunt until the very last lap.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's the thing. This season's the first season since 2016 where he knows, look, he's behind here. And I think he's actually in a weird way, he's relishing the challenge and the pressure's off him. So maybe he's in that sort of sense of rebuilding and then going again next year, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his socials, and Lewis is not, Lewis, I should say, he's not the most active person on social media. I mean, when he does put something up, it's usually something that's worthwhile. But the stuff that we've seen this season, when he's been going through this rebuild process with Mercedes this season, it's been work on the sim. I mean, that alone. When does Sir Lewis ever talk about going on the sim? I mean, this is a guy that has been often stigmatized for not actually doing any sim work or not wanting to because he hates it. The fitness stuff, the work, the debriefs, talking to his engineers and stuff, having, when he's in his off time, he's just having some fun, like, the retro gaming and stuff like that. This is a guy right now that, despite the fact that he's not winning week in, week out like he was so used to throughout his career, he's absolutely loving it. I think he's enjoying this more now than he was when he was dominating Formula One. And for me, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but Sir Lewis right now has a contract running up until the end of 2023. I have no information or insider knowledge on this, so we'll take what I say for what it's worth at face value. But I would not be surprised if, whether it's in 6 months' time or a year's time, that Sir Lewis commits to an extension, whether it's for another year or a couple of years beyond that, because I feel that he's excited by what he's doing at the moment. He's enjoying this new project, even if he's not winning every week. I'm sure he's confident that he's in the right place to do that in a few years anyway, and he wants to be there when it starts to bear fruit. And this kind of fits into why I feel what I was saying earlier, that I think Mercedes, maybe they won't win a race this season. Maybe they will. I don't know. Maybe they won't be ready to win a world championship in 2023 because Red Bull and Ferrari still have that advantage ahead of them. But let's say 2024, they're there fighting again, and they're potentially winning world championships again. I can't see a scenario where Sir Lewis would put in all this effort in right now, what he's doing into this project and all the feedback that he's given, as great as that is, and not want to reap the rewards when it's all comes together in, say, 2024, the latter end of 2023. I can't see that happening. So I just feel very confident and not surprised if he puts pen to paper and extends for another year or two after that. I'm sure the Sir Lewis Hamilton fans would absolutely love that. So I hope I'm right, because it does sound quite exciting. I'm quite excited for him, and it just seems that right now that's what's happening. Lee, we haven't heard from you on this one yet, so I'm going to give you the floor to let us know your thoughts on this one, because I imagine that sounds pretty good to you, what I've just been saying right now. Not to brag, but,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with both of you. He's definitely more comfortable in himself, and I do think he's enjoying the challenge where he is. And as you said, he's always enjoyed chasing instead of hunting, instead of being the hunted. So, right, every driver wants to win, but he's enjoying this circumstances at the moment. And he's definitely more comfortable with the car, especially since the purposing has subsided with the upgrades and the smoother circuits that we currently find ourselves in. So that is good for him, and he's definitely, you said, found his mojo. Not that it ever disappeared, but he's now also getting on top of George, and I think in his mind he's like, I've got George. I beat George. There's no questions about it anymore. There's no the stats may favour George still a bit over the season, but Lewis is up. I can beat you now. This is easy. Oh, it's not easy. George is very good, but he's just saying he's got that confidence now that George is no longer an unknown threat. So I'm sure that plays in his mind as well, that he knows he can beat George. He believe he can beat George. Obviously, George thinks he can beat Lewis, but that's how the drivers deal with themselves. But Lewis has definitely got a more comfortable situation. He loves the Hungarian, so especially if it's wet, you wouldn't be surprised if not say that Lewis is going to win, but don't be surprised if Lewis pulls out another brilliant result.
Well, it was here 9 years ago, wasn't it, where Sir Lewis in that season at Mercedes, his inaugural season with the team, where, you know, I remember talking to Mike Caulfield on this a while ago when I was interviewing him, and he talked so much about how Mercedes were really confident heading into the second half of that season, owing to what Lewis and Nico had produced, especially culminating in that win Lewis had in 2013. The disappointment was they didn't expect Red Bull to really up it to such a degree where they dominated the latter half of that season, but Mercedes were in there at the time. And it has got those hallmarks as well. Perhaps not as close as they are right now, or back then, I should say, but there's certainly something there. As I said, I'm looking at his demeanour. I'm hearing the things he says. The guy is always smiling at the moment. He's absolutely enjoying himself when he's there. I don't look at a guy like that and think that he's not going to be in the sport in 2 years' time. I'm absolutely convinced that he's going to stick around. And why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he?
Do you think that Fernando Alonso's form might play a part as well? Because it's the traditional thing for F1 drivers would be, look, as you approach 40, that's when you should be thinking of retiring. I think Fernando Alonso's form could be proof that Lewis does still have a few more years in him. That might be something that Lewis is conscious of.
Well, maybe. I mean, we're talking about a guy here that lives a lifestyle which recently it's quite unheard of, you know, in terms of diet and stuff like that. I mean, we look at other sports, you know, the vegan athletes, if we like, and I don't want to draw too much attention to this, but I think it's worth noting that certain lifestyle choices can help prolong and preserve one's career, even in Formula One. We look at someone like Novak Djokovic, best tennis player in the world right now, Wimbledon champion, been vegan for quite a number of years, and some other athletes that we're seeing coming through, you know, promoting that lifestyle, and it's all about longevity. And I feel like Fernando Alonso, okay, I don't think he's vegan from what I understand, but he's a guy that as long as you have that desire to keep on going, you can. And, you know, Michael, you know, for a while, all right, it wasn't as good as his Ferrari era, but he was still very, very good and still did a lot there. The desire was still there. So sometimes I think that's all that matters. I mean, if you flip it and look at someone like Sebastian Vettel, who, you know, he's always got a smile on his face no matter what, but I don't look at him and with the same sense of excitement as I do with Sir Lewis Hamilton in that regard, because I just don't think Seb wants to stick around because of the situation he's in. It's different for Sir Lewis, despite the fact that he's won so much more in that regard. So it's really encouraging to see. Flipping it over and looking at George Russell, a weird thing to say, but nonetheless, I'm going to roll with it. He's actually been doing rather well of late, but there is starting to, whether it's because of the fortunes of recent races or the situations he's found himself in, Lewis is starting to streak away a little bit, asserting a little bit of dominance with his team. Is this something that George long-term will be worried about? Because he's still ahead of him in the Drivers' Championship, but the form is very much in the other side of the Mercedes garage. And whilst George has still been very good, still finishing the top 5 if in every race with the exception of Silverstone, he's obviously going to be keeping an eye on this for the long term and feel like perhaps he needs to try and find something a little bit more right now.
I think right now, I think at Mercedes, you're sort of seeing like a tutorship dynamic between Lewis and George. And I think right now, I think George will be more than happy to fit that role. But the dynamic will be tested the moment Mercedes produce a championship-winning car. We saw this with Nico and Lewis. They got on well in 2013. It was very similar to this, but then the moment they had a dominant car, that's when the dynamic changes. So I think right now, the dynamic that Mercedes have fits perfectly with the project that they're aiming for to get back to the top. But once they're there, and George has a whiff of a world championship, you got to remember Lewis has 7. It doesn't mean that he doesn't want any more, but George will realise that a world championship is there. And that's when it'll be George's form or input towards the team. That's when it will become really interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. This is a very, very smart guy, and I very much admired what he managed to do in France when he managed to get one over on Sergio Perez with a virtual safety car. I love 200 IQ moments like that in motorsport. I remember Seb did something similar in China years ago. I think it was like 2016, where he overtook a few cars on the entrance to the pit lane. I love stuff like that. It really, really does. It's what separates the good from the great. And that's what we've seen from George on a few occasions, and that's something to look forward to. Lee, what are you expecting from George Russell this weekend? And again, do you think he might be concerned about the upsurge in form from his teammate?
I don't think he'd be concerned. Obviously, he would want to beat Lewis over the course of the season, but he knew going into the season, Lewis is a 7-time world champion, and based on the form prior to this season, George probably would have been kidding himself if he believed he could beat Lewis over the season in his first year at the team. He would obviously want to be as close as he can be. Or obviously, if it was a championship battle this year, obviously George will be, I want to win. But as the year's gone, I think but it's clear that they're not in the championship fight. And I just want to be as close to Lewis. I've got the lead in the points at the moment. That may not last, but as long as I can keep close to Lewis, it's a good first year. As Courtney said, he's learning from Lewis. So you can't take that away from him as well. But for this weekend, he obviously be trying to get that podium spot again. And obviously, I think he would love to be ahead of Lewis on by the end of the Sunday, just to slightly reverse that trend. He just would love to be ahead of Lewis this weekend.
Yeah, I think there's like 16 points in between the two of them, so it's plenty to play for then. It's a nice little inter-battle between the two. I mean, he's only a point off of Carlos Sainz, so certainly you've got to keep an eye on that as well. Let's move on to a battle that's developed, and I, for one, really hope that it stands the test throughout the whole season now that we have it. Alpine versus McLaren. Now, of course, Alpine recently caught McLaren at the Austrian Grand Prix, and they overtook them by 4 points at the French Grand Prix. And it's a nice little battle going on there between Alonso, Ocon, and Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. So, guys, I want to put the question to you on this one. For this weekend, who do you think is going to come out on top? And by extension, assuming that the two teams are going to be battling throughout the rest of the season for this coveted 4th place in the Constructors right now, where do you think is going to be won and lost between them?
I think if you ever look at McLaren, I think there's a lot of questions. They really brought some massive upgrades to France. They made some real changes. So it'd be interesting to see how the upgrades work in different circuits. Because we've seen McLaren have been very up and down this season. Whereas with Alpine have sort of are more of a steady unit. So it all comes down to whether McLaren can tame almost and get an understanding of these upgrades. I think that's what will make the real difference. And then the other thing is the experience in Fernando Alonso up against, the raw upcoming talent of Lando Norris, because that's where the battle's going to be. Daniel's not really on it. Ocon's had a good season, but he's still not quite on the level that Fernando Alonso is. So the main battle there will be between Alonso and Norris. But in terms of the Constructors' battle, you have to feel that with Daniel's had a slightly better weekend. He's still not the Daniel that we all knew and love on track. And you just feel that the driver pairing of Ocon and Alonso does give them an advantage in the Constructors' battle.
Yeah, I mean, I'll weigh on this in a bit and sort of add to this with another question in mind. But Lee, I want to get your thoughts on this one. Based on what Courtney's just said, like, where do you think this is going to be won and lost between Alpine and McLaren?
This weekend, I think it's going to be won and lost on Saturday between Alpine and McLaren. Because as we saw last year, Fernando is very good at defending at the Hungaroring. So if he qualifies ahead of those McLarens, that's a Fernando Alonso train the entire race.
I mean, that was a beefy boy last season, and Fernando, he's made a habit of making a few trains at certain circuits, and it's quite funny how many times have we seen this season someone take a picture of a circuit map with all the little dots on there, and you've got the leading 6, and then you've got Fernando leading a train of everyone else behind him saying he's brought the bus out again. Like, it is quite humorous ever since Monaco when he did that to Sir Lewis, and it seems to be everywhere now that Alonso's leading that train. Yeah,
so I think that's the way it's going to be won or lost. If McLaren, both drivers or one driver can qualify ahead of Fernando Alonso, McLaren, if they get on top of their upgrades, as Courtney said, could disappear. Well, not obviously disappear, but they could remain ahead. But if Fernando qualifies ahead of them, this is going to be more points for Alpine this weekend, and it's all going to come down to the Saturday and where the McLarens and Fernando Alonso qualify.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, I'm going to add a little bit of spice into this because I think there's a significant factor in this right now that I still don't think we know the answer to what is really happening right now, and that's Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, if we look at Alpine for a second and look at what they've been doing this season, Ocon has obviously scored the lion's share of the points of the team this season, but he's only about 16, 17 points ahead of Fernando Alonso, and a lot of that is owed to the reliability problems that Fernando has had. You know, if all was fair in this and that both of them had cars that acted equally in terms of reliability and other things and some team issues, Fernando would have more points. He'd be ahead of Ocon in this championship and knocking on the door of Lando Norris in this regard by comparison. At McLaren, we've got Lando with 70 points, Ricciardo with 19. I don't care who you are. That's a huge gulf between the two of them. And yes, at the French Grand Prix and one or two other races, Austria as well, Daniel was right up there with his teammate. He's certainly been up in his game. But I feel that this is going to be won and lost with him. I really do. And I'm still not convinced right now how this is, where the contrast is. Is it because, and Nico Rosberg mentioned this as well, he was of the opinion, according to him when he was talking to Sky about this, that Daniel Ricciardo is not driving badly. It's just Lando is very, very good. And it's hard for us to tell how good Lando really is because we don't know how bad Ricciardo is at the moment, or if he's bad at all. No, it's true though.
It's true. It is true.
Because you can take. Normally, if Daniel was driving to the level we expected him to, and maybe he is, we don't know, compared to how good the car is, then we could say yes, Lando's doing a fantastic job. And bear in mind, this is a guy who was almost as good as Carlos Sainz before he moved on to Ferrari. And obviously Carlos Sainz is up to his game, but then since then, Lando's driving to a completely different level. But we don't know if that's the case, or if the car's just really good and Lando's doing a great job. Could be one way or the other. But I can't help but feel, whichever way it is right now, that Ricciardo's form is going to be the key factor in this battle between the two of them. What are your thoughts on that one?
Oh, I completely and utterly agree. And with the Lando Norris thing, he has a decent car. But you're getting to the stage of Lando's career now where you want to be seeing him in one of the top teams going for championships. I know McLaren will obviously have lofty ambitions to get back to where they used to be, and I have no doubt that Lando Norris would spearhead that. I do believe, and I'm going to sound biased as a Brit, but I do feel that Lando Norris is in that clutch of young drivers, the George Russells, the Leclercs, obviously Verstappen's already done it. He easily has the ability to win a world championship. And it is getting to that time now where we want to be seeing him in one of those cars, because you're right, you've got it spot on. There are so many unknowns about this guy's ability because of where McLaren are and where their form fluctuates. It's really difficult to get a reference as to where Lando Norris's ability is in relation to the car. You're absolutely spot on there, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. Lee, anything to add to that?
Yeah, over the course of the season, I would agree that I think Daniel's the key for McLaren in this championship fight. If he continues his upward trend that we've seen the last few races, then McLaren have a chance. But if Daniel doesn't close that gap to Lando in the points, then no, it's going to be Alpine for fourth over the course of the season.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But let us know your thoughts, guys, on that one. It's an interesting battle that I feel like has only just started to come to life conveniently at this point in the season, and hopefully it stands the test throughout the whole season, and that one goes to the wide. That could be if you like, the Aston Martin or Racing Point versus McLaren, or the Ferrari versus McLaren of 2022. That could be a really good battle there, and it's got some 4 great drivers in there. Esteban Ocon as well, we should mention him, of course, returning to the scene where he won his first race last season, and I'm sure he'd love to try and do something similar again this time around this weekend. So let us know your thoughts on that one. It'd be quite interesting. Before we do our bold predictions, I want to sort of kind of summarise the other 4 teams, really. Of course, Aston Martin, they got points again last weekend, but it was a strange one. Vettel accusing Stroll of brake testing him. Again, I looked at the data and it didn't really look like Lance actually did do that, but it was a very, very strange one where he really tried to defend against him. But of course, problems going on at Aston Martin. It seems to be a bad car in qualifying, but in the race, they always seem to find their way back to the front again, or at least near the point. AlphaTauri, again, tough time to them at the moment. I mean, Yuki Tsunoda put in a great performance in qualifying to get into P8, and then his race got ruined by Esteban Ocon, really. And Gasly's completely dipped in form of late and really needs to have a good weekend. So hopefully he can find something special this time out. Alfa Romeo, they've just fallen backwards dramatically.
Yeah, they're nowhere.
It's crazy what's been going on there. And then we've got Williams, who, again, Albon seems to be on the fringes, but just not quite able to do that, or the car's not quite good enough, but it's getting there. And then Latifi, well, we love Latifi, but, what do you expect at this point? He had the upgrades on, and the only thing I can remember from his last race is that collision with Kevin Magnussen. And then, of course, we've got Haas, who, despite the excitement of them having upgrades, only K-Mag's going to have that because I believe it was Gunther Steiner said we can only give the upgrades for this weekend to the driver leading in the championship, which is Kevin Magnussen. So, overall, who are we looking for to have a good weekend or a bad weekend in that cluster? Give me 2 guys this weekend that you want to keep an eye on in that group.
I think the first one will be 100% Kevin Magnussen, because he said there's been so much talk about the Haas upgrades that have been so long overdue. They started the season so well and they just didn't keep up with the development. Obviously, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, but yeah, it's been a little bit sort of disappointing from Haas because we thought, right, here we go. They might be able to have play a real part this season, but let's see how they get on. I think the other one, have a look through those teams there. I think the other driver to be keeping an eye on is Sebastian Vettel, because I know they wouldn't have been happy with what happened there against last year. And also the dynamic there is iffy anyway within that team. And I think it'd be interesting to see how that relationship between the 2 drivers develops going forward, because Sebastian Vettel's in a sort of, you don't know whether he's going to be sort of remaining in F1 or he's thinking about his future. But I think he'll have taken that slightly personally. So, yeah, again, it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic progresses.
Yeah, those were the 2 that I was going to pick as well.
Same here.
Yeah, so I think we can just go with that. I mean, Lee, did you want to add anything, really?
No, Courtney literally said all the points I was thinking on that one.
Sorry, Lee.
It's a culture on this show. We always steal Lee's ideas. We just get in there before him. Let's call it the Thomas Edison podcast. If you like, we steal all the ideas and we get the fame for it and the glory. Anyway, anyone that studied American history or science would know that. But I digress. So we might as well go straight to the bold predictions then. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with this, the bold predictions time is when the 3 of us will give our top 3s for this weekend, and we will also give a nice and juicy bold prediction to go with that. So Lee, just because you were robbed last time out, I'm going to let you go first once again and give us your own brand, your own ideas that Courtney and I have not stolen or have the opportunity to steal. What are your fresh?
See.
No, don't.
Let's see if you still have ideas.
Doesn't normally go that way, but okay. My top 3 would be Carlos, Charles, and Max. And my bold prediction is, if it's wet, Stroll's going to cause an incident at the start.
That's not very bold. He did that last year.
Exactly.
that was the one that no one noticed because Bottas had taken out about 3 or 4 going into
the glory.
Yeah, but Stroll was like, I'll just follow him in. That seemed like a good line.
In all seriousness, bold prediction is that I think the Ferraris are going to be untouchable this weekend from the Red Bulls. So I think the slow speed corners, I think Ferrari are just going to disappear and never 1-2.
Well, I certainly hope that you're right. Courtney, what are your predictions for this weekend?
Okay, so I'm going for a 2-in-1 here. So the bold prediction is going to fit in with what I'm about to say. Ferrari are going to actually have a clean weekend and finish 1-2. Leclerc first, Sainz second, Max Verstappen third.
That is a bold prediction. But do you know what's crazy is I'm going to go for that top three as well. Exactly as you put it, Courtney. Leclerc to win, Sainz second, and Max third. I'm going to go a bit different with my bold prediction. I think I'm going to go with K-Mag to get in the top 6 in the race. Those Huss upgrades, they've been a long time coming, so they've had plenty of time to make sure that they're going to do the trick. And bear in mind, this is a car that's been fine-tuned throughout the season, so we know it's good. And we know K-Mag in France was very quick with that new Ferrari power unit. Mick Schumacher, I know people saying, oh, why couldn't he take the power unit when obviously he was at the back of the field? It wouldn't have made a difference, really, if they started at the back. Well, he could have done, but there wasn't any Ferrari power units available for him to take. So it wasn't even a case of, this is how it is with Haas. They just do not have a power unit there that he could have taken and put on that car. So, yeah, a bit unfortunate for him. But no, with the upgrades on that car, and it's a car that's very good at slow speed corners as well. We have seen that this season. So, yeah, I'm going to go with K-Mag in the top 6.
Or Sergio, he's going to be outside the top 6.
I didn't say who's replacing him. It could be. I mean, we could see Fernando get in there again, like get his elbows out, and you never ever know. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, George Russell top 5 definitely. I think that's the safest bet in the world right now. So we got that in. I don't know who's going to come. I'm going to go Fernando 4th, Russell 5th, and K-Mag in 6th, and Bottas hits Hamilton because they love each other so much, and it's been a while since they got together again. So that's always a nice thing. But it's respectful anyway. But look, those are our predictions, guys. Get your predictions in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to us on your favourite podcasting platform, head over to the YouTube page and you can let us know your predictions as well. Or you can tweet us at DNF1_official or on Instagram as well. And of course, we have our TikTok page, which I do need to change the template on YouTube to promote that as well. We'll do that in due course over the summer break. But of course, check that out. DNF1.official, our new TikTok page, which features our YouTube shorts, Courtney's Corner, where Courtney talks about some events or some stuff going on in Formula 1 right now, some intriguing talking points, and he obviously gets you guys to check that out. And of course, it's been rather successful so far on TikTok, getting quite a lot of interaction on there. So some great stuff on there. And of course, head over to the YouTube channel as well. You can get that as well. But of course, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and consider subscribing to the channel. We're still chasing 1,000 subscribers. No qualifying watch along, unfortunately, this weekend. I'm otherwise occupied, so I'm not able to do it this weekend, I'm afraid, which is a shame because it's going to be a really good one, I reckon. Wet weather might affect qualifying, so it might be quite a fun one. But we will be back with the review of the Hungarian Grand Prix, 5 p.m. UK time, with Bryson Sullivan as well. I'm really excited to have Bryson back on. It's going to be a great show. Definitely check that out before the summer break. And of course, if you follow us on your favourite podcasting platform, I will get to the end in a minute. Make sure, if you think we're worthy, to leave us a 5-star review. Of course, as I said several hundred times already, guys, if you do not listen to us on Apple iTunes and you can't leave us a written review, take a screenshot of you giving us the 5-star review, send it to us on our socials, and we will give you a shout out on the next episode as a reward for your ongoing and unconditional brilliant support. We really cannot stress how thankful and grateful we are for your support. But until all of that, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. And remember, if you're not first, you're probably DNF1. Take care.
See you soon.
Goodbye.